Not very nice, they're not at all. Like my master, all the things, but I. I'm like, I got it. I thought, no, I'm saying that first. I heard myself. He's about your size. So it's
Are you good? Can I get some lunch?
Probably take one on the couch.
It's an easy job.
Yeah.
You can call it. Yeah, I got her. She was like, this was, she says, oh, she did a little reaffirmed that this was a sweet shot. But no, she was like, absolutely not. Yeah, we got her a lunch for her. She got that, you know, no way to class. That's right. Right, she know, no, you're supposed to be like. Right when you talking about it.
Yeah.
Game one.
Yeah.
I was.
You could. I still get all this Friday. So any joke, I was like, I feel that. We just learned to. And then somebody says, oh, yeah, well, I don't know. I know. That's an overarching concept. I'm Impressive, but I also know that they. So grab you, it's great. And do our introduction here. Okay, so I'm so happy to introduce Mayor Jenny Hart, and I will try and summarize her beautiful biography here. He's from Fort Collins, that's about it. will you talk about some of this?
Sure, really, we can skip.
Okay.
I mean, is that one, that's like third grade and all that stuff.
She has an undergraduate degree in sociology at Colorado College, an MA in geography from University of Colorado, followed by an MA in special education from Purdue University. And she has a PhD in literacy and language from Purdue as well. She is a Peace Corps volunteer, which time as well. Peace Corps volunteer.
Which country?
Paraguay.
Okay.
Yeah. Morocco. So, great people. It's the volunteer. She served as a state representative, focusing on water, agriculture, and small business and public education. After 3 plus terms in the General Assembly, she was elected mayor of Fort Collins in April 2021. Perfect. Okay, so let's welcome Mayor Jenny.
I know a lot of you, but it's really nice to meet new people and see new faces and see some people that I know, and I'm really glad that you're taking this. And full kudos to the Community Foundation for sponsoring this. It is really helping build a depth of water knowledge that's very vital amongst Northern Colorado residents, so I'm very grateful to them for doing this. You guys all know each other. I think I can read your name tags enough, and 45 minutes seems long, but I bet it's gonna go fast. So I'm gonna just do a little intro on a couple things, and then I'm gonna just do Q&A, because I don't know what you wanna know, and I could ask my husband, I can talk for a very long time, and I might just miss the mark. So, that's what I usually do. So my background in water, I'm gonna talk about water leadership or policy or both. Leadership's not always the same, it's policy. Sorry. It's not funny. It's true though. So I was running for state rep in 2013. The election was 14. And I just knew that I wanted to do a lot of preparation for it because I like to prepare myself sort of academically for things. So when I moved home I started getting my MBA, and then I have 3 kids, I have a full-time job, my husband traveled, and I was like, no, I just get kind of bored at home. So I did my half MBA, and then I started in for office and said, well, this is more captivating than that. And I have my LSAT book by my bed. So, I just like to study. I'm a very good self-motivator. So I was riding my bike with Randy Fisher, my predecessor, who was chair of ag and chair of water. And he said, Jenny, when I leave and the water engineer, when I leave the General Assembly, there won't be a lot of people who know very much about water when I leave. And I was like, oh. And it kind of made my life's work going where other people doing things they don't want to do. Because my dad said, root for the So that's why I became a special needs teacher and those sorts of things. So I said, oh, that sounds interesting. And I just turned 50, and I did a lifelong career educator. And I was like, I'm gonna do that. So I just started reading law books. I'm boring, but and then I went on every field trip they had for water education in Colorado. And then the water committee was touring around the state the following summer. And I just got my little Volvo and a little tent, and they'd stay at this hotel, and I'd stay in the KOA, and then I'd come over. I just sit in the back and I'd listen and learn to everyone. And I was like, oh God, we wondered who was stalking us that whole summer. Yeah, well, I just want to know what you're saying. And then the laws that were proposed, I was just reading and just really self-educating. And then calling anybody who would want to talk to me about water. And, the water community is lovely about that. People would, it was just some person. And then, there's no one can clear a room or a table like someone who's running for office who's never been elected. Boy, no kidding. You sit down and they go, oh, you have a lunch break, they don't come back to your table. Because why would they invest time and energy in you if you haven't been elected and you could just be, whatever. But a lot of people did sit down and talk to me about water, and they realized how serious I was. So anyway, I just did that sort of self-education thing. I did get elected. I did put in for the water committee, and the speaker did put me on the water committee. And I served there for 7 years, and we rotate the chair, so I took my turn as chair, and I became chair of that as well. And then, of course, it was just full on again, and then I said once that I did when I was at the top, I did most of the water legislation. I said, I don't like to say things that aren't true, so I went back and counted. And 82% of the water bills that were done during those 7 years was myself and Emily. And I never ran one water bill without a Republican on it with me. Even when quote, I didn't have to, because I think you have to, because what you're trying to do is make policy for all of Colorado. And then I think if you can't get a Republican on your bill with you, then that should be a signal that maybe it's not right for everyone. Because Republicans are generally elected from more rural areas. So maybe you shouldn't do it. So, until I got, someone else to agree with me and run the bill with me and make it stronger, then I just thought maybe this isn't the right thing to do. So we have quite a few hundred to zeros, right? So then people start trusting you. They start thinking, oh, well, maybe she's not in that, like, John Becker, who I did a lot of water bills with, he said, I've been looking for black helicopters in this bill since you brought it to me. You know, just like some sort of like, what's she trying to do? Sneak it past me. He goes, I don't see any. I go, dude, no, it's not. So people started to realize that I don't do the gotcha game or the black helicopter bill or anything like that. And then you start hitting on all cylinders. And John was the vice chair of that. No, he wasn't. He was the minority, head of the minority. That's no story. And he and I would meet every Monday. And he said, what do you do that for? I said, well, you know, we're looking for a 7-0 or 9-0 on that. I'm not looking for 5-4, right? So when you start acting and being like that, I think then you just, it just kind of, it's good for Colorado, basically. So that's how I approached that. And then I ran for mayor and, I applied, I just like a challenge. So, I applied to be on the Water Quality Control Commission and the governor put me on that. So I sit on there and I was on there all day yesterday. I call that my side hustle, but I did have to have a meeting. But you will do what I say, right? And I was like, yes. Because well, once you're on a board, your responsibility is to fulfill your board duties. You know? So I did say that we were generally in line with water policy and conservation, and that I thought that wouldn't be a problem. But I certainly wouldn't change my vote for any political reason. Anyway, I think that's going well. And that's sort of my water background. Other people want to know, like, how to go from special ed to water. And then I'm just inordinately interested in all the things that Fort Collins does with water. We can talk about that. And I can talk about some broader water issues, whatever you think you'd like to know. Or what it's like to be policy or those sorts of things. Whatever you think. Anything controversial or touchy is my favorite thing to talk about. Yeah. Sure.
When you were down, back then.
Mhm.
How do you see the differences now versus then in terms of, like you said, you wouldn't run a bill with not having that. How do you see that now? And
Yeah, I think.
versus then?
Yes, the first 4 years I was in, the Senate was Republican and the House was Democrat, and we were 34-31. In the House. And now there's supermajority in the House and might be a supermajority in the Senate. So it's changed. People text me, oh boy, do we miss you? I'm like, yeah, well, I get slaughtered down there. Of course you do. I said, well, you know, it is, but that happens, right? And Wyoming has supermajorities. And then that happens. And so, I always felt like Colorado was more balanced, evenly balanced. But our two-party system, I don't think is working the best for the people at this stage in our democracy. I'll be honest about that. I still think there's some room for reason. But, yep. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just,
You're from Greeley? Yeah, John Cook was my buddy. I said, John, want to run for governor with me? And he goes, yeah, who's governor? And he goes, you are, because I'm going to governor.
but I guess, how do you talk to people? I mean, what would you, if somebody was running, was in those positions? I mean, what insight would you give to them? Or I look at it as we need more people that are of the mindset of like you to what, how do you sell that to? What I like to call, how do you sell that to normal people to step up and how do you handle it?
How do you lure them around?
Yes, how do you do?
Well, I really feel like, and I do spend a lot of time thinking about this, about the role of democracy in our public policy making. So if you always go back to the role of voter, right? Just keep going back to that, right? So, my district was West Fort Collins, way more than 50% independent. So I would, whenever I thought it was the right thing for my district, I would vote. Oh, I always voted what I thought was the right thing for my district, and sometimes that wasn't with the Democrats. And I did that since I was a freshman, and they initially got mad at me, a couple special visits, which didn't go well for them. I was like, no, the lawyer for the Democratic Party, I was like, you're not behaving. I was like, whatever. Because I work for the people and I'm a member of the party. And that's how I talk to people who are running for office. You don't be a member of a party, but you work for the people. Or dance with the one who's right now. That's what my mom told me when I went to prom. Look at your voters and reflect your voters, and then you get some mosaic. And they got used to me. I mean, I got ag chair and then I was ag chair. Like we got a new speaker, who didn't appreciate me, but I still was representing my district. You can't take that, right? So you can't take that representation away, right? Then she left and then I got back at you. Like people are like, oh, that's nasty. Like, oh, yeah. That's kind of how it goes, but no one take away the people who voted for me and their right to have representations for me. Full stop. So I just talk about democracy and how it's really supposed to work. Yeah.
So we just had, Martine Ferguson last session talk about the importance of democracy and how you engage in dialogue in our super polarized world. And what I'm hearing from you is like, we need to rely on democracy to, I guess, get good people in office. But what do you do when the general public and the media and, the news pundits are all trying, it's like they found the little levers to like push us in the opposite direction and they're playing that up.
They need money on that.
How do we get our public
To stop buying into it.
to get the right people?
Well, losing, public trusted news sources has been huge. And then the rise of social media has been huge degradation in our society, right? So we don't have a shared public news source. We don't all trust the same Walter or whoever. That's a big problem. And so now legislators can be a headline news without the vetting of, say, a Denver Post or Denver Total Board or anything. What used to be news is what reasonable journalists who grew up in journalism schools who taught them all those good techniques said, right? I mean, you couldn't get in the, if your goal was to get in the Denver Post, which mine never was, you couldn't do it unless you were doing something newsworthy, which is what they need as newsworthy. Now you can just circumvent that and stand on the steps of the Capitol with a little selfie stick and no one's there and no one knows. And you can go on and on and on. So yeah, then just don't buy into it. Just 99% of the people are not down with that. Brian Del Grosso was the minority leader when I was there as a Republican from Lovelands. And he and I had a great debate on the House floor, and then I always sat on the Republican side. I had my desk there, but when I debated, I would sit on that side too. And they said, why? I said, well, I know what you guys think. I'd love to know what these guys think. And if I'm gonna be in debate with them, I might as well sit here with them instead of sit there and do this. So then I go and sit next to Brian. And it made, again, freshman year was a little hard for some people down there with me, but then they got to see me. And I sit next to Brian and he'd be like, man, I just love those boots. I was like, I know, they're sweet, aren't they? And we talk about literally how he liked my shoes. And then he'd get up to there and he'd go, boom, and I'm like, okay, Brian, watch this. Let's go. And that's all fair. That is not a personal thing between me and Brian. And I was like, hey, why don't we call the vote and see who's going to win on this one? And then the Denver Post wrote up some really nasty article. And I went to them and I said, you guys know that's not what happened. You know that. And they're like, yeah, but that doesn't sell. What you and Brian do as friends and colleagues doesn't sell. And I said, well, then I'm not gonna talk to you. Fine. I mean, I am a little bit of a strange person, I know. I am.
Doing the strategic planning of the city for water,
Okay,
and we want expansion of Halligan. Is the city warming, City Fort Collins warming to Glade Reservoir at all? You're not a participant, but is there a movement towards warming towards that project to be a
there
participant?
is a more rational approach. Well, a 404 permit, if you haven't learned about those, that's a game changer. That's what I'm telling my colleagues. The city knows that. And if you want to look at Two Forks, which was the last dam that was declined in Colorado, that never got a 404 permit. When it went to the EPA said no. The EPA signed off on it, like, it's a done deal. Save the Polluter can sue them as many times as they want and raise money off that and lose as many battles on those lawsuits as they want. And that's kind of, you'll learn, I could talk about the role of an activist, so I'm not being negative when I say that. I mean, that's a fact, right? And activists have a role in our society. That can be important, it can also be detrimental. It's also has to do with free speech and all these other things. But I've been convincing our counselors that that's the game over. If we do not collaborate, we will be, the region and the town will be worse off for it. I mean, we may or may not become a participant. I mean,
You're not for office now, be careful.
I have my own ideas about what could happen, and then that would be, you know, when I speak as mayor, probably, but I mean, it makes some sense to have one dam instead of two, and if Blade's gonna go in, we could I mean, anything from that idea to increase collaboration with them just makes sense. So yes, Kelly Wilson says it's gonna be World War III, nuclear war. I said, okay, let's go, because it's not gonna be nuclear war. There's enough people who are rational thinkers to go, oh, okay, since that's a reality. And Gary Lochner, when he's quiet and sits with me and without a microphone, says, yeah, when Glade gets built. I said, excellent, good, you know that. He goes, yeah, okay, great. So then I said, what's the most environmentally conscientious thing we could do? That's good for the river and good for the people and good for water. Well, let's talk about that. And we do. Oh,
We're gonna expand Halligan?
I don't know.
Don't know.
I mean, that's the plan. But
Nick, I have to jump in your territory.
No, you gotta be careful.
I don't work for the city. I work for the people. And that's true. Yeah.
So kind of in the same vein, but kind of more at a macro level and maybe more in line with your experience at the state level. The whole reason for the reservoir is demand, water supply demand, right? And I'm tying this to affordable housing and just housing growth in general. But at the state level, has there been discussions about the interplay of water and housing and growth and development and kind of just what this role has that been drilled down? The two are kind of mutually exclusive, right? So, you can't have one without the other, but I guess you can. That would be very expensive according to engineers. But I guess my question is just how, and this may be a crystal ball kind of question or a magic 8 ball kind of question if you're savvy. But I'm just trying to understand what level has been drilled down at kind of the legislative level, because when you're in the local, kind of in the trenches, you get stymied by a lot of the intersections of the, I won't call it politics, but it's just the overlying laws and kind of our restrictive uses of water. And a lack of understanding surrounding that, which is more or less sitting on the table right now.
I know.
But I think that the question is how much more education or how much more, kind of initiatives do we have to make to kind of get this to be a bigger deal, the interplay between the two?
Well, you know, what happened, the governor's housing bill last year. Does everyone kind of know what happened there? So,
The land use bill?
yeah.
Yes.
To rezone, yeah, statewide, and it went like that. But when they called and they asked me about the bill, I said, look, in my advice, don't put water in. Don't throw that in there. We have a single subject rule at the Capitol, which the federal government doesn't have, so you can't Christmas tree things on there. So I said, just make it a house, just make it a zoning bill. And then if that passes, see how that shakes out, do the water bill next year. Because if you try to throw the water in there with the housing or the zoning, I guarantee you're gonna screw it up. And they're nice enough to actually call and ask my back. And they said, you gotta separate those out because you don't know how. And when it moves really fast and there's 70 or 100 amendments going, right? The bill's gonna be amended so quickly that your water thing is not going to be, because there won't be enough legislators going, oh gosh, if we do this, we're gonna have to do this. I go, you can always undo it, so it's not the end of the world. But I said, it'd be much better if you just let that go and then bring in the water next. So there is an appreciation, but the depth of the water knowledge at the Capitol is not very, there's Cleve Simpson, he's a senator. And then there's some other people who try hard, but you know, you get elected, you're not supposed to be jack of all trades. I mean, it's hard, it's, you know, so, but there's a lot of really good technical experts that are guiding a lot of that legislation. So it's not always, I mean, don't think for a minute the legislature write the bills, because we don't. So that's a good news. But if it is in your wheelhouse, you can't shape it. So I guess to answer your question, yes, there's a recognition about those things. People are working on it. And I think there's overall general willingness to do that. They did leave it in that housing bill, then the housing bill, so I'm giving that some advice. The big deal that's coming up this year is, I don't know if you guys are gonna get to the SACA decision and notice. The waters of the United States. Anyway, that's what I'm working on now. I was on the governor's task force this spring. And frankly, state doesn't have a good response to that Supreme Court decision, but toss it back to the states. And then I see this piece of legislation coming up. I'm like, oh gosh, there's a train wreck waiting to happen. So you know exactly how it's gonna go. And so I'm calling a couple people together and just said, look, you guys, I think this is what's gonna happen. Just to like highlight that for them and say like, why don't you have this off at the pass? And like, just something smart, because it's really important now. Yeah.
Question for you, how, you know, with your whole kind of expertise and history related to water, how did that play into the city's kind of discussion under the whole 1041 kind of debacle that we went too long ago? And then how that relates to the other water districts and municipalities and kind of the greater regional good versus just maintaining that oversight in the city of Ohio.
Yeah. Well, 1041s were tricky for me, right? Because, you know, I'll be honest, I didn't really want to see them, right? Because I can't look at anywhere around us where we've had substantial environmental degradation. I asked them, I was like, what problem are we trying to solve? Like, what are we doing? I could also see politically transplanting post station. So then I just said, look, let's shape it. So I talked with Kelly Olson, who wanted it all over the city and extra jurisdictional, which was my favorite. To restrict that down to only natural areas and only within our the city boundaries, right? So we went from identifying 80 projects that were possible down to so, and then I asked them to be able to get it done in 9 months and under $1 million. And then I went to Brad Lynn and said, get your 1041 now. So basically, we have a right to take that power in Fort Collins, and we are a home rule city, so it does fit who we are. The other thing I was thinking about, if you notice, we chose two things with water and transportation. And the one thing we didn't talk about very much is the one thing I do worry about is 287 is a state highway. That's College Avenue. Well, CDOT could just come up and just go, hey, sorry, Fort Collins, not sorry, we're doing this, and you have no right to do it. And that to me was a bigger threat in terms of the look and feel of Fort Collins and any sort of environmental degradation, things like that. So we never really talked about that, but that was in the back of my mind. And then in terms of the temporary ones, I really tried to get utilities to work with the environmental planners. Because our projects, and then I made sure that our projects are included too. Because I like, say Fort Collins is not gonna make any rules, regulations we can't get through. Right? So that was absolutely important to me. So that gives me some comfort, and then a government should not make something to block something. You wanna block something, say we're gonna block this.
Yeah.
But the regulations should be exactly what they say they are, to maintain the environmental, whatever, of our natural areas. That made sense to me. So, yeah, but if it becomes something else, I'm gonna hang on it. Because that's not fair.
Mayor, many of us are from different municipalities in the region, and I just wonder, based on the demise of the land use bill, and I agree with the governor's intent that we've got to have a very robust conversation about growth and where we're going as a state. But do you see a future where we can work regionally in northern Colorado and really talk about how each of our communities are growing and how we can share the natural resources and potentially share water resources?
Yep, and we do it a lot. We've just passed our revised land use code in Fort Collins, and it'll be up on seconds next Monday. So you can stay tuned for that if you like. I think the governor's gonna try again. I said, I don't know if he's gonna get any more votes than he got last year. I don't know, so, and I'll just leave that alone. But yes, thanks to the Community Foundation, we have, every 3 months, we have a regional leaders meeting with the mayors and the city managers, which is great. They started the regional water, talks, which has been fantastic. The regional mayors and I get along great. We realize that in our own communities, we're distinct enough that everyone can maintain the character of their community and operate. You know, we'll have a solar company come to me and say, we want to locate for Collins. We need 2 million square feet of manufacturing space. I said, well, you're probably gonna want to look somewhere else, right? That's not really who Fort Collins is, even if I kind of wanted it to be, it's not. So, I refer them out to our colleagues that, have a different, and I refer them to OED and those sorts of things. So that's just an example. Yeah. I mean, I guess, Tim is not gonna get topped off, but I think Fort Collins would have it. Or topped off. Anyway, but yeah, we have different identities. And yes, we get along great. I think, and they were saying that, Rand just retired from the Weld County Foundation. Yeah. And, he said that, cause we were all joking and Paul and I were laughing about something and we're all just having it. And he goes, oh my gosh, I wish I could tell you how these meetings started, however many years ago. It was not like this. And then I said, maybe in 10 or 15 years, you'll be looking back on the water collaboration meetings and go, yeah, when we started, there's a lot of distrust in the room. There's a lot of fear and a lot of, questioning. And hopefully I'm not. I'm sure. Well, Kelly DiMartino gave a good talk at the CSU for the town and gown thing. And that's the cities and universities, towns get together. And she gave the closing comment. And I was sitting next to Mike Hooker from CSU, as the communications guy. And she said all the right things about how to get along and make a friend before you eat one and all the collaboration and stuff. And then there's the pause and I looked at my poker, I go, and then lawyer up. Stop it, don't sit next to me. And I think if I was giving that speech, I would have said that. To acknowledge the fact that there will still be disputes. There will still be times, no matter how good a friend you are and how well you collaborate, there will still be times when you cannot reach a resolution and you do need to seek a third party, which is the judiciary. And even then, it doesn't have to be nasty. It's like, hey, look, we're just saying this so differently. We're gonna ask for somebody else's help. And that's why I love our three branches of government. So having said that, all the way, all we get along and everything, there'll be times when we have a serious dispute. But the extra jurisdictional of the 1041s was so not on. I mean, those other mayors, I was just like, they're like, you're so lucky you're funny because we're gonna kill you. And I was like.
It is my understanding you're in Boise, but anything that you learned from that trip, from that community that you feel could be applied here in Fort Collins in terms of water or planning, I guess for that matter?
Yeah, there are about 240,000 people. Boise State, obviously, the difference between Boise and here is they're the principal city of their state. They're also, the capital. And they have a political, there's some political challenges for that, right? That we all have some, that's all absolutely true, but with their state. So, their airport is just booming, right? And if we look at it, Fort Collins, Loveland, it's called, the three letters are FNL, so that's what we call it, FNL. But if you look at FNL, we're struggling to wonder what that, so they have some things that are a little easier in the ways that it's just them. But they just passed a land zoning reform code that you could actually lot split, and on each half of your loan lot, you can do 12 units.
What?
We can't even barely get a duplex passed. Kelly D and I looked at each other like, I mean, it was kind of remarkable. But they're also, in a valley, they're a little bit landlocked. So they want to preserve their open space, which I think is something that's lost in our discussion. People want to frame it as only affordable housing. It really is to preserve open space on too. So so I would say they're sort of in the urban area, they're more of a monoculture. But they do not get along with their state government. And so it's really, when they're trying to attract tourists, they just talk about the Boise experience. So it was different in those ways. So I don't know as much translates as, but maybe more on a technical level, it translates better. Something.
Water impact fees,
Yeah.
It's this preference to my understanding. How do they do it differently than we do?
Yeah, I don't really know about their specific, but you can look at the new one plan, zoning codes. Don't know, wow,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I kind of want to move to Boise, live in a townhouse. Anyway,
Not where you live.
yeah, we're full. Any more questions?
I'll ask a question. It's about, the city of Fort Collins proposed increase of the water. I understand that got kind of shot down, but can you just talk about that and your perspectives on?
Sure. Well, I'm just honest, disappointing to me. That's the way that was rolled out on a Friday night at 5. And what I told Kelly D is that the thing that disappoints me most about that is you broke the trust with the community. It didn't go to the water board. I called Jordan Reagan, who's head of the water board, and I was like, hey, this thing's coming up on the agenda tonight. What did the water board say? And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. Wow, so wait, you didn't go to the water board? I go, well, so maybe Jordan, we're not talking about the same thing. It's probably my bad. And then I get there and they hadn't. So I said, that really frustrated me because I really worked hard to have trust in government. It's an uphill battle. But it's important that the people of the place that's being governed trust the government. And so when something like that happens, that I think breaks the trust, is really bad. Okay, saying all that, sorry, utilities.
I agree.
So that was tough. And then I think that it was kind of a classic what you don't do is, well, there's 6 water districts in Fort Collins. That was just gonna pertain to Fort Collins water utilities. So I said, well, why do we land use code? All the building will go outside of here. And I said, did you guys talk with the planners? And they said, why? Because you're gonna impact our building. Oh. So it was just a kind of myopic. 2 days later, I had to talk with Phil Weiser at the Water Congress on water collaboration. He goes, would you like to give an example? I go, I have a negative. But it's exactly what you don't do in the water world anymore. I think maybe 30 years ago, sure. Right? Elko was that way out there, and Fort Collins loved the sort of thing. But now we're really growing together and we really rely on each other. And we really have to reach out and work together. And then we have to consider our zoning codes. And what's that gonna mean? And then the price increase is based on a philosophy of market-based pricing. But they said we need 500 acre more feet of water in our water portfolio, but they base it on CBT shares. So we have to buy CBD shares. If we go out, we could buy water supply storage shares. So why base it on the most expensive one? How's that dude from Denver Water? Well, Denver Water serves 1.2 million people in one huge, it's totally not the same as we are. So my husband's an economist. He goes, they just took 0.31 and times it by 179,000. That's all that consultant did. I was like, do we have to pay him? You know,
That's what I said.
that's so funny. That's exactly what I told Billy. Did we have to pay that? And then he left, and I was like, I think I did, but that's it. So the philosophy of development pays its own way, and we do it on market-based price. Maybe that's not our model anymore, because it's not just a nuisance fee anymore. So let's be smarter. And let's collaborate harder with our other districts. And then let's also bring in all the departments, because as we're more regionally minded, our departments have to be more integrated. Thanks, Nick. Nick's like, I'm not. So,
I mean,
yeah.
I feel like it's important to say this as well.
Mhm.
And Mayor, I don't think I'm gonna tell you anything you are not already well aware of on the back end of this. First of all, I don't disagree with anything you said. Part of the challenge of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, is there's the policy aspect of the decision, but then there's the political machine behind the entire thing. So part of the reason for, very candidly, the failed flood rollout of water supply rates was the machine behind it. Not so much necessarily the policy decision, which was made by 1 or 2 people and then forced through hell or high water, no matter what. So there was a consultation with community engagement, communications and marketing, any water board, anybody else beyond this small myopic 1 or 2 people who made the decision.
So what's the machine behind it? I mean,
By the machine, I mean the rest of utilities, right?
I see. I thought you had some special interest.
Oh, no, sorry.
So
You just want to talk.
I see.
Yeah, so by the time it got to council, it had already been a lot of other additional people trying to say, hey, this is gonna go badly for you. No, really, this is gonna go badly for you. No, we promise, this is gonna go badly for you. And then it got to the point where they said, screw it, we're gonna do it anyway. Okay, and then it went badly for you.
It's not on the calendar.
Exactly. So it becomes like these decisions and these policy things are already so dense and so technical and hard to explain. And then when you add in this additional layer of political machinations of everything and the personalities involved, it becomes even more difficult to have these insanely dense conversations and complex things. Because none of that stuff was considered, frankly.
Right? No, I could tell.
Yeah. That's abundantly clear.
And then as the elected, you go, well, why does city staff have any politics in there? And I would be naive to think that there aren't, but it really shouldn't. be too much.
And this is when it turns into my own personal therapy session, so apologies in advance, but it was incredibly painful. See someone sit up in front of the city council and get asked questions that I knew for 1,000% of a fact, we had slides addressing those, and those had all been removed from the presentation 24 hours before.
See what I don't know? It's hard though, right? Yeah, and you're,
That's the playing field we work in, right?
Yeah.
It's the playing field we all signed up to be in, so it's part of the reality of the situation.
yeah. So I'm just trying to make good decisions, right?
Absolutely.
And so those are some of the barriers. So thank you for speaking honestly about that.
Sure.
Like I couldn't tell like all that, but I just know some. That's just, it's not how it's supposed to be.
But I'm also glad that it forced us to step back and take the extra year to have that larger conversation. Big egg on our face, not at all, we're operating, but fortunately it's operating in a better manner. It's a great organization, so.
All right, well, I think we are.
For taking this class.
Make sure you grab.
Thank you.
All right, and Jennifer. Come on up. Okay, you're gonna transition into Colorado River water law. And as you've heard already, in various presentations, this relates to us because we actually use a lot of Colorado River water through the CDT project. So we are having Jennifer Gimbel speak. She is a water policy scholar at the Colorado Water Center at CSU. She previously ran this program. Like 3 years. So I'm trying to pull some big trends here, but let me just read you a little bit more. She has a Juris Doctor from the University of Wyoming, a master's degree in mathematics from the University of Delaware, and a bachelor's degree from the University of Wyoming. She most recently was the senior water policy scholar at the Colorado Water Center. She has taught graduate and undergraduates interested in water policy issues and published articles on the Colorado River and water issues facing Colorado. You all should have received one of those publications. You distributed those this morning. She has served as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science in the Department of the Interior, impressive, and was Deputy Commissioner for External and Intergovernmental Affairs for the Bureau of Reclamation. So she also was the Director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board from 2008 to 2013. That's a group within the Department of Natural Resources that works to protect and develop the state's water resources. As a water lawyer, she worked with the Attorney General's office in Wyoming and Colorado. And in August 2022, she was presented as the 2022 winner of the Aspinall Award by the Colorado Water Congress during the summer convention. She also is a Terry J. Stevenson Scholar for the Common Sense Institute and has co-authored the study Adapting Colorado's Water Systems for a 21st Century Economy and Water Supply. Bottom line, she's very impressive, and I'm so happy to say. A role model for many of us. So thank you, Jennifer, for being.
So one of the thrills of having such a long history in water policy, and we're not a big group, but big enough, is I get to say who I hired. I hired her. That to me is the biggest accomplishment. I have a whole list of other ones. Well, thank you, Karen, for having me here, and Brandon for lunch. And I'm just going to give you this is going to be a whirlwind view of Colorado River. You've been reading about it in the papers for the last couple of years. The document you have in front of you was written by co-author Karen Vaughn. We wrote that because we were getting so many questions about the river and everything behind it. And so we wrote it not for the water walks, but for everyone else, so that they could get some of their questions answered. And in fact, I had my neighbor read through one of the drafts. I will admit he didn't get through it. So as you get to the end, it might get a little too wonky. But that's there for your reading. You can get it electronically if anyone's interested. I think we still have a couple boxes if you need it. So Colorado River, man, this is one of my favorite subjects. I passion for the Colorado River. We're not gonna go through this pretty quickly. Don't know if you've seen the snake diagram yet. Yep, okay. Well, we have to share those rivers. Somebody talks to you about compact, everybody take compact?
Yeah.
Yep, all right. So you know that an interstate compact is an agreement. It's state law and it's federal law. It's approved by Congress. So when people ask me, we got a bum deal on the Colorado River Compact, let's just renegotiate. Yes. Want to go to Congress right now? You know how many representatives California has in Congress?
Yeah.
It's just not practical. We have to live within our means, and it sets up an incredible framework that we can live by. This is a famous Remington print that I just love because it's just a classic whiskey's for drink and water is for fighting. It gets attributed to Mark Twain, but we don't know where it came from. It's a great statement. So, Delphus Carpenter, a Greeley boy in the early 1900s, a lawyer, a rancher. He was working with the governor and the state legislature on dealing with our neighbors. In fact, he started this idea about compacts when he was working with Nebraska on the South Platte. And he basically said, rather than fight it out in court, why don't we use the compact clause in the Constitution, the United States Constitution, and come to an agreement? Then things heated up on the river. You know, California was developing fast. All the western states had the doctrine of prior appropriation. The United States Supreme Court, in a conflict on the Laramie River between Wyoming and Colorado, hinted that since both states were prior appropriation states, it was probably going to use the doctrine of prior appropriation to divide the water. As it so happens, Wyoming used more. That's what they got. Delph Carpenter was involved in that litigation. He started looking at the Colorado River and how fast it was developing in California, and it freaked them out, and we've got to do something. So he went to the states and basically said, let's sit down and agree under the compact clause. The Colorado River Compact is the first interstate water compact. All due to a guy from Greeley. So let's look at the Colorado River Basin here. It serves a tremendous amount of people. Yeah, and you have to excuse me. I just have 2 hours on another session, and so I'm a little slow on the uptake. Do I have my notes on there? What I wanted to go ahead. I'll just swing it. You can read about it in my paper. So, serves a lot of 40 million people, a lot of irrigated acreage, a lot of megawatts of power are produced here. $1.7 billion to the US economy every year from activities in the Colorado River. Now, the thing about the Colorado River, are you working on presentation mode? Yeah. Okay. The thing about the Colorado River is most of the water is used outside the basin. And that's why I like this map, because you can see where it's used. It's used in Cheyenne. It's used here in the Front Range. It goes down the South Platte River and it helps the farms. Of course, for California, it's used for many municipalities and farmers outside of the basin. So that I find is an interesting fact. So here we have the compact. So these old white guys get together, and a few from each state and a couple from the federal government. And they formed this committee. And the federal government appoints the current, at the time, Secretary of Commerce to head up the negotiations. Do you know who that is? Later became president. It's who? So he herded those cats and helped them put together the contract. So they're sitting around the table going, well, can we divide it up? Remember, never been done before. Shall we divide it up by each state gets so much? How are we gonna do it? Nobody could agree. So finally, they divided the pieces, the upper basin and the lower basin. Thank you. Sorry, I threw it in there. You always know I like your best stuff.
That was in the 20s.
That was in the 20s. So they're talking, they look at, you know, the river basins, and there's kind of a divide of the upper basin and the lower basin. So based on everything, there's a divide at Leaf Ferry, and they say, okay, Leaf Ferry is the dividing point. Lower basin gets half the water. Upper basin gets half the water. Well, how much water do they have to begin with? Ah, that was the question. Bureau of Reclamation said 20 million acre feet a year. Last 10 years show that. USGS said, yeah, not that much. But we're not sure how much, but not that much. Actually, they were sure. They have their lower numbers into the 12 million acre feet. These guys, being policymakers and having to go back to their governors, use the 20 million acre feet average, thinking, okay, we divide it 7.5 here, 7.5 there. That gives us enough to deal with Mexico, if we ever have a treaty with Mexico, gives us all in surplus. In fact, the conversation was a lot about surplus and how to distribute the surplus. Well, that's fine. So Upper Colorado, so we had, let me go back here. So each basin had a certain amount. Now you see, we have what we call division states. It's Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico, because they're most of the upper basin, although you see Arizona has a clip here. So the lower division states, Nevada, California, and Arizona, and then New Mexico has a piece of that. So they divided that and they said, upper basin, you cannot deplete the stream. You cannot overuse your appropriation. And the way you don't overuse your appropriation is that you assure that 75 million acre feet over 10 years goes to the lower basin. Okay? Lower basin, one of the reasons the compact became critical was lower basin was getting slaughtered by floods. They were just getting flooded out. They needed a reservoir. They needed Lake Mead, and so they were pushing for that. And that's, of course, then what they got was Lake Mead. Arizona didn't approve the compact for decades. And that's a fun story, but I'll leave it there. So Congress passed a law that said, all right, if 6 basin states agree, that's good enough. So then it became law. Then, a little bit later, well, let's go to the upper basin. So the upper basin then got together in the 40s and said, now we need to divide the 7.5 among ourselves. Well, these were all engineers, and they knew that solid numbers were not a good idea when you're talking about river supply, because there were highs and there were lows. And so they decided to look at apportionments in percentages. So Colorado gets 51.75% of that appropriation. And then all the states work with that. And we're worried about what if the river does run dry, how do we deal with it? And so they set up a process as to how the states will help to comply with the compact. And they established an interstate committee called the Upper Colorado River Commission. Each of the 4 upper division states have a member, as well as the federal government has a member. And they're the ones who represent us in these talks. So when you come down to it, here's how the river is split up among the states. 14%, 23%, lower basin, not percentages, but actual amounts. 4.4 for California, 2.8 for Arizona. That's out of their piece out of the upper basin, and then 1.25 from Mexico. So that's how it all meshes together. And oh, by the way, Congress approved these 4.4, 2.8, and 0.3. Remember, Nevada was just like in the middle of nowhere. You know, Las Vegas wasn't going yet. And so they were like, okay, that's fine, we'll agree to that, 100,000 for the year. So they got specific amounts, and Congress determined that amount. And later the Supreme Court says that's what you get in the compact, and confirmed it. River lives and dies with these two big dams. In order for the upper basin to protect its interest, along with some negotiations that are going on in Arizona with the Central Arizona Project, upper basin states looked at to have Glen Canyon Dam built. Very controversial. This is in the 60s. We're getting into people being more aware of environmental issues. And dam in the Grand Canyon has environmental issues. And so there was a lot of controversy with it. But they got it through. Here's how it works. The Hoover Dam is lower in the system, and that is the bucket that all of the three lower states draw from. So what they do is they call up the Bureau of Reclamation, say, I order 4.4 million acre feet California for this year. And that gets delivered to them. Up here, we have a whole different system. We heard about the prior appropriation doctrine. We don't have a big reservoir up above us. Our reservoir is below, and it's meant to be a bank account. Because we know the variability of water flows, even without what's been going on lately, and we needed to make sure that we could meet our compact obligations. So we constructed Hoover Dam. At the same time, Blue Mesa, Navajo Dam, Flaming Gorge were also a piece of that package. There's this convoluted group of laws and agreements. It's called the law of the river. Now, if you want to get real technical, some people will say some of this isn't the law of the river, others say there's more to the law of the river. But basically, that's what you see when we manage the river. There are 30 federally recognized tribes on the river. Tribes were acknowledged in the compact. That's it. Federal government has responsibility to tribes. Now, tribes under federal law, and this was a Supreme Court decision in the early 1800s, have the right to water, enough water to create their home, to do their farming, to do their industry. You have to go to court or have come to an agreement to decide just how much water that is on the river. We have two tribes here in Colorado, the Ute Mountain Ute and the Ute Southern Ute. We have an agreement with them about how much water they're entitled to. A lot of tribes, I worked on tribal issues for Washington, and a lot of tribes will give up some of that water right in order to get some money to develop it. And so that's where that is. There is still a huge chunk of the Navajo Nation that has not been adjudicated, and that causes some consternation. The other thing is the Supreme Court determined that tribes, the water that tribes use is charged to the state where they're in, wherever that water is used. So you can see that New Mexico and Arizona might get a little bit nervous about that, or about the non-wells. So here's, you've all seen this. You know, we don't even call it drought anymore because the drought comes and then it goes. This has been here since 2001. The scientists call it aridification. More extreme events. Look at that hailstone, that's from Lamar. It was just this summer. Hotter means the plants use more flooding. The disasters are increasing in almost exponentially. Here's a chart that kind of goes to what I was talking about earlier. 15 million acre feet. That's what those old boys decided. The average since 1964 has been 9.6 million. Now, the upper bay or the lower basin continually uses more than its apportionment. That's okay. If we're not putting it to beneficial use, they're allowed to do that. Our lower incomes, they've depended on it. And we still have a right up here. However, our rights up here are dependent on a prior appropriation system. And so I may have a right that's earlier than the compact. And the compact says if you're earlier, then you don't get called out by the compact. However, that's a 1922. I have a 1900 right. That's junior in the South Platte. That's junior on the West Slope. That's still not that great of a water right. So I get called out probably on the worst years. So we live and die by that stream flow and what Mother Nature has given us. You can see the drought. Here's, we had the good years, had a couple good years in here that helped us live through these bad years. But for those reservoirs, the crisis on the Colorado River when it happened in 5 years in 2000. These reservoirs kept the economy going during all that time. I gotta hurry up. Karen kicked me out. So we started with, what are we gonna do? States got together, they put together some short-term management guidelines and agreements that expire in 2026. The framework is the compact, or is the compact. But this evolves into how do we work together? How do we make this work when what is in us? All these agreements were not good enough until this year when the water year was good. They all expired in 2026. Now, during this time, we saw in the paper that the secretary declared shortages. The shortages weren't declared up here. They were shortages to Arizona. Arizona agreed to take the biggest hit if there wasn't enough water flowing into the pouch. And that's what you saw. So they cut their water deliveries by a lot. In 2003, they announced even more cuts.
Did California take any cuts?
Thank you. California did not agree to any cuts built here, but the drought, the street flow had to be so low that it was practically never going to happen. Now, okay. So part of as the drought came on, the upper basin, I'm going to give you a sense of how the upper basin participated in this. You'll hear lower basin say, oh, upper basin, you just say, yeah, we live and die by prior appropriation, yada, yada, yada. But we did, we actually took water out of Blue Mesa. I don't know if you remember the headline, but it disturbed the recreational aspect. We gave water from Flaming Gorge, and that helped to lift the level of the reservoir. Now, the thing about the reservoirs are they weren't built to be empty. And so the engineers are like, yikes. You know, that all works on the physics of water pressing against the dam. And we were also, there's also certain towns that got deliveries out of Glen Canyon Dam. And the water in the dam was getting lower, and that was gonna happen. And so but for Mother Nature, we would have been in some dire straits. So now we've got talks going. Upper Basin has also put efforts into system conservation programs. We're going to demand management conversations. We have Colorado River Drought Task Force that was put together by the legislature last year. So they're all having these conversations about how can Colorado best manage. And now the states are kind of lived through the last 3 years. Mother Nature gave us a break. So now the concentration is going post 2026. States have agreed. The compact is the foundation. And we're gonna work from there. Look at lessons learned, structural deficit, etc. $4 billion by Congress. The drought issues in the West, those to be funneled to the Colorado River. What's happening with that water or that money? I don't know. A lot of short-term solutions, like, all right, I'll pay this farmer to dry up this field for a year. That helps for that year. Doesn't help in the long term. And so there's a lot of money being thrown around. I just hope some of it does something. Here's a couple books, Science Be Damned and Water by Fighting Over, another myth about water in the West. 2 friends of mine have written those and have mine papered. And with that, I think I'll stop for questions.
Jennifer, you mentioned about California becoming highly dependent, rural basin becoming highly dependent. You didn't, maybe I missed it. What happens if they are highly dependent? They're taking water that we now say we need. We let them slaughter or, or dry, go dry or
Are
what
you
happens?
asking my personal opinion? Or... Are you asking my personal opinion or what's the law?
Oh, listen, the lawyer.
By law, we have to send 75 million acre feet over 10 years.
So you have to look.
By law, we have to send 75 million acre feet over 10 years
Okay.
down to the
Well,
lower
they're
basin.
taking more than that now.
They're using more than that.
Yeah. So
All three
if
basins,
if
all
we
three
start to
states.
get dry.
So
So we say to them, you get 75 million and no more, and then LA says, well, we're gonna,
yeah, we got all these people,
that's right, we do have to think your rights
Look at
on
these
that.
people.
Okay.
which is why we're not going to renegotiate the contract. So, yeah.
To that end, I understood that the secretary has initiated was an EIS and it's supposed to be released later this year. Is that right?
So, yes, the secretary under federal environmental laws said all of those agreements I showed, the short-term solutions weren't working.
Right.
So the secretary was saying, I got to do even more than that. I know you've agreed to take cuts, but now I'm going to force you to take even more cuts. They needed to do an environmental impact statement on that. That's what's going to be released.
Do you have a prediction?
Well, the lower basin couldn't agree on how to move forward. They finally did, with
Right.
California taking some cuts sooner rather than later. And upper basin is just kind of waiting to see how that all plays out and how it affects the river.
Thank you.
You bet. Anything else?
I've always been curious about how if the river is managed on the assumption that it's 15 million acre feet per year.
In the
Is
lower,
that correct? And is that ever going to be reassessed? I'm sure that with that comes a lot of issues.
it is reassessed,
Okay, gotcha.
and
So,
that's why we know it's less.
gotcha. So it has been.
So how do we, so the question now is, there's not 15 million acre feet. There's 10 on good days.
Right.
How do we deal with that?
Gotcha. And so that's what's currently being.
That's what's being
Yes,
talked about.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good questions. Hey, you guys are so lucky to be in this class.
Yeah.
You got Benton and Karen. I couldn't give them higher kudos for moving forward. Thank you for the invite, Karen.
Thanks, Jennifer. Day too.
You bet. It's complicated. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm trying to connect to Benton somehow. Because I need to put this on Teams.
Yeah. Yeah. So, is that a logo? Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, yeah. What, just the walls?
No deal.
Can you? Thanks for
So Karen, now I'll pass it the, are you able to bear? I don't think I've given you your time.
Actually, connect.
Yeah, just,
Yeah. Do you think that will take a long time to?
I don't think it does. No, it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
And should take 20 seconds. And then it's that's the, okay, that's it already finished. Wake up, figure out. Then let's try. Okay, so your screen's on. So we can just do that. Ignore all the other. Do you want this? You want the cracker?
Yeah.
That's this one, right? Because it has a USB.
Sorry, this is taking so long. How do you do the presenter view? Benton?
Like, okay, cool, like, we're fine with that. Next 2 years.
Because you just want the view where it shows the slide and the class, right? That's why I always I've done it. That's a million times.
So you.
I was literally trying to do it on my computer after I finished your presentation.
It's just. It was right.
We're gonna roll with it. So that, I'm not sure you might.
No, you got permission, right?
But then I.
Now you are.
And I was like, cool.
All right. So sorry about that. The whole point of that was so I could see my notes on this presentation, which I still cannot do. So that was a huge waste of time. My apologies. Technical stuff sometimes doesn't always go as well. So I'm going without notes, which is not ideal, but that's okay. So we're gonna do a brief kind of skill development exercise. And it comes out of this book, which is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, written a long time ago, but there's some really great points in here that, as I was saying earlier, are kind of the foundation of trust building and being able to have dialogue with people, which many have talked about that need, including Mayor Arndt, and kind of how do you start those conversations. So the one that I'm going to focus on, there's 7 habits, but I'm going to focus on this one, which is the principle of empathic communication. This is, if you think about your day-to-day work and how much you communicate, how much do we get? We talk, we write emails, we listen. How much time have you spent in your life learning how to write, learning how to speak? But how much time have you spent learning how to listen? Probably 0, right? That is not a focus of ours. So this habit, the principle of empathic communication, largely focus on empathic listening. And I'm going to talk about that in depth, and we're going to do a little exercise as well. So the focus of this is really seek first to understand and then to be understood. So what is this word empathic? Well, you can think of it, we've heard empathetic. It's very similar. So showing an ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And if you think about, okay, why are we learning this? How does this relate to my job? This is really, when you're seeking to understand someone in their perspective and get inside of where they are, you can really build trust and then move forward on things that you are not able to do otherwise. So when we're talking about all of the polarization that occurs and kind of this side and that side and my water and their water, we have to really try to pass those differences and thinking of each other, going back to Martine's presentation, thinking of each other as these opposing forces, right? We have to understand our differences and value those, thinking of them as, trying to find creative solutions together where we're understanding these different perspectives, knowing that, my perspective, that's one perspective. I have a huge amount of biases that I have developed throughout my whole entire life, depending on where I'm from, what my life experience has been, who I've been exposed to, who I work for, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just the reality of how we live. We have our biases and we have to kind of put those, at least not put them aside necessarily, but just open up to hearing other people's perspectives and using those as a way to move forward and create synergies rather than a way to move backwards and create stumbling blocks. So if you think about, a typical conversation that you have with someone, this is, I love talking about this. So you think about, you're talking to someone, someone's talking with you. It's like, what are you usually doing in a conversation? You're thinking about how you're going to respond to the person. You're thinking about, okay, yeah, they're making that point. Oh, I'm going to make this point about how my experience was similar, or, this happened to me one time. So there's different levels of listening. The first level is just you're flat out ignoring them. You're not really listening at all. They're talking, you're thinking about something completely different. The second level, you might be pretending to listen. So you're kind of like, yeah, oh yeah, definitely. But you're not engaging in that conversation. The third level is selective listening. So this is kind of the gearing up your response kind of thing where you hear a piece of information and you're like, oh yes, like that is important to me. Now I will make a comment about that important thing because it matters to me. there's, the next level is attentive, so you're actually, you're hearing what's being said, you're paying attention, you might repeat some things back to them. You're still not really engaging on a deep level. And then we have empathic listening, which is not just understanding what is being said, but you're also picking up these other cues. So it's body language, the feeling of the conversation, behavior. There's a lot of things that go into communication. That's not just what we say. And it has a really big impact on our interactions with people. So when you're listening empathically, you are engaging with the person, you're trying to understand them from their point of view. You are looking at, are they distressed? Are they not really, engaging with you? What is their kind of tone and feeling with the conversation? And, when we go in these different forms of listening, there's typical ways of responding, and I've talked about some of these. So a lot of times, you're hearing something, you evaluate. So you're like, yes, I agree on that, or no, that doesn't make any sense, based on my point of view. You are probing, so you're kind of throwing questions at them. Well, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? Or, did you think about this? And again, we're using our own frame of reference to do that. You might start to advise someone. So you're giving counsel based on your own experience. And, a lot of these things, they're not necessarily wrong to do, but you have to kind of do the empathic listening first and get to a general understanding, and then you can, ask questions or advise or give more feedback on that. And then there's interpretation, where you're trying to kind of explain someone else's motives based on your own motives. So you're assuming that they're behaving in such a way because that's the way you would behave, which may be true, but may not be true. So those are kind of your standard ways of responding. This communication, it doesn't only pertain to professional communication, it also pertains to personal, your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your children. And there are, if you go and read this chapter in the book, which I can send a copy of, I believe, without infringing on copyrights. But he gives examples of these different conversations that happen, especially with like a father and a child, and just how we totally go past each other because we're not really listening and we're not really engaging on a deep level. So with an empathic response, there's, again, kind of these different stages of where you want to get to when you're listening empathically. So the first stage is you might mimic content back to someone. So you're listening and you're saying, oh, yes, okay, this is what you're saying. The second stage is you're kind of engaging your thinking skills a little bit more and you're rephrasing the content. So this shows that you're not just mimicking, you're actually, thinking with your brain and putting it back in different words, which helps that person then kind of respond to that and say, yeah, that's what I mean, or no, not really. The third stage is you start to understand some of that feeling. Say, I understand you're feeling frustrated, XYZ. And then the fourth stage is you're rephrasing the content, you're reflecting feeling, you're engaging on a deep level, and you're able to get to the bottom of things and build that trust at the same time. And then the second part of this is when you are communicating. So not just listening, but communicating, seeking to be understood. And this is really, this is so critical. And I'm sure many of you know about, this is essentially framing. So how can you relate something that's important to you in a way that is going to touch on the values of something that's important to someone else? So water is important to me, because I like to recreate in it. But I know that water is important to this person because they like to use it for their farm. How can I put my thoughts in that context so that I can build trust with that person and work we're coming at the same kind of level of understanding about water. We all value water, right? And so how can we move forward on that? And framing is so very important, and it's not like you're manipulating your point of view, it's really trying to, get at the same base values. You're trying to arrive at this place where, you know, you respect the person's perspectives, they respect your perspectives, and you can agree on shared values. Make your point simply and visually. A lot of times we just get very complicated. Water is complicated, so, you know, it's hard to do simply, but the easier we can make it and the more visuals we use, usually the better it goes. This is very important. Don't push, be patient, and be respectful. Respect is a very critical part of empathic communication. And again, it's that whole building trust. So if you're coming into this process with an intention that, you know, you want to get your way, and that's why you're doing this, it's going to fail. Because people will see through that, and you have to really approach it from a sincere standpoint, and want to engage with that perspective. So we are going to do a brief listening empathic listening exercise. So get ready. So we have handouts, and I sent those around. Take a couple minutes to just look that over. There's a bunch of like skills listed on one page, and it will help you as you go through this exercise, think about how to do empathic listening. And we're gonna break into groups of 3. So the first person is going to take less than a minute to describe a work-related issue from the past or currently. It can be very broad, it can be, you know, very specific, it can be whatever you want it to be. But basically, you're describing an issue that you've had. Don't need to give names or, you know, details on who or what. Person number 2 is going to practice empathic listening skills. So, you know, you're gonna look at your worksheet and you're gonna think about how you might ask questions or rephrase or seek to better understand what that person is describing. We'll take about 3 or so minutes to do that. Person number 3 is gonna be an observer, and they're gonna just look at the body language, look at how the conversation goes, and then provide a little bit of feedback after that conversation is over. Then we're gonna switch roles, and so everybody does each roles. Make sense?
Yeah.
I'm thinking that this would have been good to do at the beginning of the day.
Yes.
Not after like 7 hours of very dense presentations. Okay, well, we're gonna give it a shot. And I will be timing you all, so I'll tell you when to switch. But it'll be about 6 minutes per like patient. So you 3, Mike, and up to Julie. Jeff, Gus, Nick, Ellen, Lauren, Jennifer, Dennis, David, Leslie, Nick, David, Jason, Julie. Okay, and I'm gonna start timing you guys, so you gotta get going.
I have a question. I think you're the training guy, so I'm sorry that way you're not.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm just thinking about shifting your phone.
Yeah.
I guess everybody's, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're listening about shifting and not things which are thought. Yes.
Give them a 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's I keep looking at the screens and I'm like, who's?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
You're fine. Maybe that's cultural justice.
One, that's good.
Do I understand how you feel this morning? I feel like it's like,
Control, they did.
And happy you.
Yeah.
You're not.
One of the excursions. And that was exactly the reason was to try to get both down.
I'm trying to. What kind of best?
Somebody that is. I didn't know that it was like, because you don't want to lie. I was when I was an issue with like the And also, yeah, there's. And I was, yeah, I was, because I watched the video for Jennifer's husband. I didn't even see that video, like they did, mention of, you know, like. Yeah, this is like.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, we're almost pushing the 2023, come on now.
Yeah. If you're not gonna do that, it should be on last.
Yeah. Well, at least that sounds good, that there's places for me. Hopefully. I've been really thinking about asking my parents about the internship undergraduate. It's like she becomes better again. I would love to actually get to. Yeah. Yeah, calls it like she's fun, yeah. Since I never called, she said that's. I mean, that would be sort of like, just the existence of that. Well, I love that, that's, yeah, she is. Yeah, she's really cool. I saw that. She's like a marathon. That's ridiculous. She runs. We talked about it. She was like, let's do a marathon together. I was like, yeah. Yeah, she runs. It's impressive. A lot of people didn't know. Yeah, I mean, because. One more than a lot of. You know, this. That's the one that I'm really, it seemed like not wanting to get into running, and I'm like, okay, I was moving up to my marathon, I was like, I don't know how to run today. I don't think that fast. I don't have very long times. When I'm training, I'm like 8 miles, that's gonna take me all now. So I'm gonna it's better than that, absolutely. Yeah. I always, I don't typically run much. I go to the gym like 6 a.m. The only chance I get to get. Other than that, if I miss 6, then I'm figuring, well, your day's not as Yes, I was gonna say. You'd like to have some extra. Very busy. And then you get tired of the day's over. I've learned my skills. I'm an early person, so I get tired really early. But my brother wants to stay up late. Doesn't wake up to me. So I'm like, of course he's there. I wake up at noon, my day's over. I'm like, I'm halfway done with it. Now it's a privilege to get to that early. I can just type in, you know. Yeah, when I was talking with Jenny previously, you know, I was like, you know, I'm pretty sure back in my slides, but so why would I do that? So, yeah, it is interesting, powerful and a burden at the same time. That's a hard connection.
But you.
I think I'll do.
I've done workshops, I've been out. Part of it. Discussion. So it's really interesting because it's like how you enter a conversation. It's all totally different. One of those things you're trying to. Yeah, it is. It kind of this kind of new. That's really. I don't think it's choose more intentional than that because that's like choose the type of stuff that you know what you're looking for based on your problem. This is a little more flexibility. It's really the intention. Like I say, it's just like the yeah.
So thank you for taking that energy. We're gonna do a quick kind of wrap up here. So how did that go? How did it go, everybody?
You're not being tired.
Bring it back to the group. I love that you all had, it seems like great conversations. Was it hard? What was hard about it? What was hard about being a listener?
I think for me personally, my personal, what do I want to say, my personality, and my wife would say this too, is you say something to me and I'm like, I got this. I got, you know, it was super hard to, listen to Julie and her minute, issue that she brought up as an example and to sit there and bite my tongue and not say, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? And I did that once, but then at the end, according to David, I asked a really good question. Some tension. Yeah,
Good question. Or, I mean,
it was more a question back to Julia,
Yeah.
put the ball back in the court, like, do you think that, and it was not so much a fix, it was more of, have you thought about this, you know, from a different standpoint, so it was good.
great. I am in the same boat as you. My
Yeah.
husband will tell you the same thing. Why didn't you, Yeah. What else did you find challenging, or what was easy, or what was just general thoughts on the process?
You ask questions, no labels can be, you're not labeling anybody, or you don't never in trouble, just ask a discovery or inquiry question. Because you say, oh, what about this, and that, then that could always be misinterpreted, because you can only control your delivery, you can never control someone's reaction, so.
We were just talking about that. My 15-year-old gets mad when I ask questions. In a position of like just trying to understand and not, like she takes it as I'm questioning her and like what's going on.
That's a whole other session.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that can be very much applied to your family life, because, yeah, we have certain styles of communication with our partners, with our children, and trying to like break out of that a little bit and engage differently can sometimes be really helpful. Yeah. No, I'll just- Any other observations? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, like, I think I like to like listen, but I also think I'm the person who's like listening, or I need to take that step back and be like, okay, I actually need to try to process this, and I'm really slow at processing, which is what we kind of talked about, is like, I will come up with a solution later, but in the moment, I'm like, oh man, I didn't take this information well, and I don't know how to quite respond back, so. But I do want to talk to you about it, because I feel like I've had a similar situation, and I jump in, so.
Yeah.
Taking that step back is really hard for me.
Interesting. And did it help you to try and rephrase things or like engage a little differently with the content to help you process?
I think it was just more recognition in the back of my brain while I was listening to them, where I was like, okay, I need to just take a step and let them finish their story before I say anything. And I don't need to say anything that applies to this. I need to ask them a question.
Yeah.
Something that I like is make sure that I am listening to what they're doing. So.
Great.
I think it's open. No, you first started talking.
I feel like the hardest part for me at least is letting people not talk, like letting them pause and collect their thoughts or whatever. And I think sometimes, or at least for me, it helps to like voice that, to be like, I want to give you a minute to think about that. So let me know when you're ready to chat about it, because otherwise it's like a reminder for me. Because, and now I play a game with my whole team called The Next One to Talk Loses. Like you put a statement out and then you wait and you let people have a conversation in their head of like, this is what I think about it and this is how I'm moving forward with it. And then when you feel like you have a complete and coherent sentence, because like sometimes it takes a minute to process that or whatever, then you say something. You don't just say something because you got an immediate reaction. You should like sit and think there. And if you make it a game, then they're more okay.
Very cool.
But yeah, because I'm not good at that. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And
that
that
is
it out loud.
That is one of the things on the worksheet is like, you gotta be okay with pauses as people are processing and they're thinking and, you know, it's hard to communicate well and communicate your ideas effectively. So yeah, I love that game. Did you have?
To add on to that, what we talked about a little bit, processing, one thing we do is ask each other, learn about each other, the percent of information they need to make a decision. Are you a 40%er or a 70%er? Neither one is good or bad, it's just understanding that I have a staff member that needs 70% of the information before they make a decision. And then we actually incorporate that question into our hiring process when we're hiring people. And it just helps us understand better how we can, it's kind of, I'm gonna use your side.
That's interesting.
It's a cool now.
Nice.
And I feel like the things that we talked about, you know, there's every day just loose chat that you're talking to somebody. I looked at this weekend, blah, blah, blah. But, and again, going back to where the world has become a little polarized, I think if we took more time and like you said, took the pauses, I could find myself, I should be listening to Deb, but my mind is already 10 steps down the way. If I had stopped, took that time to listen, actually had that, I think we could avoid some of that other stuff. It's just, we are always in such a hurry. So maybe for me, recognizing what subject I'm dealing with, what's the conversation, if this is something that really is needing, that I needs my full attention to. So I think that helped.
Dovetailing onto that, what I was gonna say is the distraction piece of it that Ellen mentioned as well, because I'm bad about that too, but I think we surround ourselves with stuff that is distracting, whether it's TV or you're trying to listen, but you're hearing somebody else's, or not to shame anybody in this room that has a smartwatch, but I went back to a normal watch, because every time your stupid wrist buzzes, what happens? You lose focus and you take a quick look at it and you're distracted, right? So the listening has got to stay intentional.
Yeah.
Or else you're gonna get distracted.
Yeah, all of the distractions that we have now, I mean, even just my phone, I don't have a smartwatch, but it's enough. You hear a buzz and you're
Hear
like,
about it.
like, how can we, try and at least for, 5 minutes you're talking. So block that out and focus on that. And to go back to your point, a lot of times it feels like, oh, you're spending so much time in this conversation. You've got so many other demands, but thinking about what that's going to give you in the future in terms of building the trust. And if you're really trying to understand an issue now versus like you're halfway listening and then it blows up because you didn't effectively deal with it, that can save you a lot of time in the future. So that's another important part of this. This is really great conversation. Any other thoughts?
I
Yeah.
was just gonna bring up that, with empathic listening, I really like that it's both kind of gathering facts and making sure that you understand the facts of the conversation, but then also the feelings. And that I think when you really hear somebody, you're really acknowledging their feelings. And I like that. That's both.
It's both. Exactly. Yep. It's the content. What are you saying? And am I understanding it correctly? But it's also incorporating that, like, because we are not robots. Like, things happen and we get emotional and that becomes part of the issue and part of our communication. So it's really important to address that and understand where that person's coming from on the emotional side. So, okay, we have a short amount of time left. We have no time left. Cool. Book clubs. These are the book clubs. These are the times you signed up for, and I believe that you all are now in the December spot. Is that correct? Nick, Wesley, and David. Yeah. Second, David. Yes. And Dennis, we are going to get you signed up for a book as well. So Dennis is gonna be joining.
Right here.
You can read that one.
That's fine.
You would join Mark and Stacy.
Okay.
You can join, but we're going first, Dennis. Yeah.
I'll take last, you'll be first, you get to do all the work.
Okay, so yeah, December book, folks, make sure you're meeting with your group. It's up to you when you want to do that, but you need to meet twice before December. April, you got some more time to do that. You can incorporate it into the mornings if you want to. A few more things, just to make one more second of time. So November 2nd, I don't know if you all saw, I sent out an announcement. We're having a water trivia night at Avogadro's Number here in Fort Collins. The goal is to bring back old cohorts, bring you all into the mix, meet new people, compete against each other in water trivia and, drink a little bit, have some appetizers. If you can come, that's great. It's 4 to 6, November 2nd. November 14th is our next session. That was changed from the 15th. So that will be held at Northern Water headquarters, which is based in Berthoud, and we'll give you all that information prior. And we're going to do a tour that day. And so we'll get done around like 2:30 or 3. We'll do content in the morning, lunch, and then we'll do the tour. So you can take all your great questions for Northern to the next session.
Will it be done at 2 that day?
No, it will be done at 2:30 or 3.
Okay.
We'll be doing the tour. Yeah. We'll try and get done as soon as possible.
Tuesday.
You said it was the 14th, the 15th, is that?
It's the 14th.
14th.
Yeah, and I think we updated that.
Yeah.
And November 15th is the Northern Water Symposium. That is a water event that you could attend if you wanted to and do your little write-up on. Great event. And then December 13th is our water for municipalities, I believe. And that is when the book club reported it. So just following up, you've got your same homework questions here. Those are due by next Monday. Any questions about the book reports or anything else logistically? Yes.
Yes, the tour, did you need to have any sort of dress code associated with that, she out in the field?
We will send that in an email. I think we'll just be outside, so you'll want to dress appropriately for
It's cold.
November.
Because
Yes.
Yeah.
it's a windy.
Okay, well, thank you all. This was a great session. Oh, sorry. Yeah. If you want to look at our book rentals, we have a list of book rentals available here.
We have, if anybody wants to.
Yeah.
Try to leave your name tags. Leave your name tags and you can bring them back, so you don't have to remember things.
Yeah. No, Karen.
Maybe we could say like.
Yeah, one more thing on there. Big old treasure trove of books. Yeah, bring it back if you got Yes, water got you.
Oh, my wife and I are being honored as distinguished. We'll be there. We'll be a speaker. Not my speaker.
We have a question. Where,
You're done?
I'll be.
no, it's the, what's the name?
No, yeah.
You got
You got the whole
policy book.
Thanks, yeah, have a good
I don't
one.
think it's what we thought it was. So we're wondering
Good luck
if we
with,
change it to join another.
Reforestation, have fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Like,
Inclusion.
I would say something different.
Right.
okay.
So look at our
I'm sure.
book list.
I'm worried.
I would like to, I know which one I like,
Okay.
which is water law for non-lawyers.
There is, but if you wanted, I mean, if you both wanted to do that, we can.
Yeah, we weren't thinking about it.
Another group or just 4 too many?
Learn a little bit about this, but.
I prefer doing it smaller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what, you wanna do that? I mean, is that a bad thing?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
You're gonna pick up that one too?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, if you don't have any more copies, we just take from us.
No, that's
So,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've already read most of these.
Are you good with that book or do you? Okay, well,